in your work life, you can't ascribe your self-worth to the work. You want to do a good job, you want to be successful, but especially when the work itself is born out of creative ideating, when things get rejected, I remember early in my career, I would be like devastated. I'd be so sad. If I'm working in a more corporate environment, I have a little bit of an easier time being like, yes, I'm being creative, but it's more about the creativity is more in the solution to the problem, not necessarily the aesthetics of it.
Today we have Katie Dadarria joining us on the Freelance Mindset Studio podcast. Katie, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I had the pleasure of knowing Katie for many years. We actually went to college together. And back when we went to college, one of the things that really stood out to me was what a multi-talented person Katie was. So she was a communications major. She was in a comedy troupe. She would do plays that were really, really incredible. I would go and see them every year. And then she was also a photographer, and she would sing too, which is a little known fact about Katie, and she may not advertise that at all. uh, I remember you would sing hello to me every time I saw you, so it was fun. So what I want to know, somebody with as many talents as you have, what did your career journey and your career vision look like when you were starting out, and how has it changed over time?
Sure. Well, one thing that Joy did not happen to mention is it wasn't just a comedy group, it was a murder mystery improv comedy troupe called the Committee for Creative Enactments, which I just feel like I have to mention because there's so many people that I know now that don't necessarily know that I did that. And it explains a lot about me. We graduated in the middle of the recession, one of the recessions, and I just remember there was a lot of high anxiety around that time because nobody was really getting jobs prior to graduating. And so there was a point in time where I was maybe going to go to grad school. I wanted to go into advertising, and they weren't even taking on interns because people, if you didn't have internship experience during school, they wouldn't even take you on as an intern post-grad. It was a disaster. So something funny that I like to reflect on in terms of my career is kind of like the weird way that I got into it. I studied communication, so it was broadly speaking like public relations, public speaking, some level of design, advertising, marketing, stuff like that. It was a very genericized degree at the time. And so I was looking for design jobs. Advertising wasn't really panning out, but I was looking for like design types of jobs. But I ended up getting a job, a temporary job at a publishing company in Boston after graduation. And I didn't design, but I worked with designers. So I thought, okay, this is at least a way to sort of get a foot in the door, because that was the whole thing. You had to get your foot in the door somewhere, blah, blah, blah. And then I remember being on Twitter. And I'd followed a lot of Boston area design people at the time, in the hopes of like meeting people, networking, and then conniving my way into employment. And I was tweeting about a band. Now, this band was a bunch of dudes that I worked with at Boston Duck Tours, which, for those that might be unfamiliar, is a amphibious land and water vehicle built in World War II that are used in many cities as tour vehicles. I worked there for a few years in high school and college. It was great. I'm still friends with so many people that I work with there. It changed my life in so many ways, which is hilarious. And a bunch of the dudes there were in a band. And so I tweeted something about the band. My Twitter feed was mostly just inane observations, which is still basically what anything I put on the internet is, like weird, inane observations about stuff. So I tweeted something about this band, and then one of the designers that I followed messaged me and said, "Oh, I work with a guitarist, and also we're hiring."
What?
Yeah.
That's how it happened?
That's how it happened. And so this was at a startup called Where, which was in Boston, that got bought out by PayPal back in, the early 2010s. And so he was like, "Yeah, we're hiring designers. Do you want to come in for an interview?" And I said, "Okay." And so I went in and I did a proper interview, but then he also just like walked me over to a meeting and introduced me to this dude, Jared, who's one of my closest friends. And was like, "Jared's the guitar player and Sidewalk Driver." And now he's like an engineer, and he's like in the process of giving a meeting. And he was just like, "Oh, hey, what's up?" And then
What?
I got the job. So it's always been funny to me, but it's something that I've ended up leaning on, like for a lot of my career, is just like what my father would call soft skills. He taught me soft skills, and that was so integral to me getting the gig, was just sort of like, you get your foot in the door somehow, one way or another. And so I started I was a graphic designer at the time, which was really a user experience designer, which was really also an interaction designer. And my title has just changed a billion times ever since, even though it's kind of been the same type of work. But yeah, that's how I got into like startups, and that's how I have a design career.
Wow, that is wild. So,
Yeah.
I mean, the lesson there is really get your foot in the door. And it honestly doesn't matter what building the door is, because in your case, it was an amphibious vehicle, right? It was the duck tour, and that led you into design and it led you to where you are today. Amazing. So, at that point, did you get any pressure to like specialize in just design, or were you already finding it was a good fit for you?
It wasn't necessarily pressure. It was just sort of like digital design. I mean, digital design is always fluctuating, but especially at that time, I think it was really nebulous. Like I mentioned, I've had a million different titles, even though the job description hasn't been like remarkably different. User experience design was somewhat of a new path at the time, but I've really always been kind of a generalist in design in terms of like doing actual just straight up graphic design, doing some level of marketing design, occasionally print work or display work, and then doing like the strategy work and the brainstorming and the sketching. So that's always been a part of the role. There was a point in time when I was working at where I was working on this mobile advertising component of the business. It was like geolocated mobile ads that you would get on like banners at the bottom of apps and stuff like that. And so that was a little tough because I was doing mostly that. And so when I was trying to get another job, it was difficult because it was very, very niche. But
Mm.
for the most part, the design part of my career has been pretty general. And now, obviously, people are much more familiar with UX design and product design. I didn't necessarily feel pressure. I knew I wanted to do design. It's only later in life that I'm like, I also want to do art. And where did all my art go?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So that happened in reverse order. It wasn't hanging on to the extracurriculars as you made the transition. So what was this moment like?
So, eventually corporate America destroys your spirit.
What does it?
Well, so here's the thing. So I was really artistic growing up. I drew a lot, all that kind of stuff. I made things. I loved to do all sorts of artistic things. And once I got, into college, I was just sort of like, well, design is a way to be creative, but also make a lot of money or make some
Yeah.
semblance of money.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I thought, which ostensibly, yes, is true. And depending on the environment, it can go either way. But there is an element of, when you're working in a corporate environment or when you're working on somebody else's idea, right? It's not actually as creative. And also, a lot of design in terms of products and user experience is working with patterns because while you're trying to make innovative experiences and things that are interesting and delightful, you're also trying to understand that people have patterns that they utilize on the internet and you don't want to upend those for no reason because
Yeah.
people are just going to get frustrated and then they're not going to use what you want them to use. So it got to a certain point where I was just sort of like, I'm grateful for where I am, but like this work is not like fulfilling my spirit.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get back to something that's less time in front of the computer, that is more tactile, that is outside. I mean, I'm always looking for more things. Like the photography is one thing, which obviously we're going to get into, but
Yeah.
like I'm also like I want to learn to do hand painted signs and I want to learn how to do woodworking in my small apartment. Now that I own this place, I'm like I want to get a dining room table that looks kind of crappy and I want to fix it
Oh,
somehow on my little balcony while not poisoning people with paint fumes. That
yes.
sort of stuff. So it is kind of the reverse order of like, okay, I did all the things that I was supposed to do, and now I'm
Yeah.
here, but what is making me happy?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember having a moment like that as well. It
Mm-hmm.
was a couple years, I mean, maybe I've had many moments like that, but I
Mm-hmm.
remember a couple of months actually after graduating college when I was working at a bank, and it was just like a very surreal experience to be able to have gotten the dream job that I wanted. But, it took me so many extracurriculars and so many years of planning to get there. And once you got the job, you were expected to not keep the extracurriculars. And that was very confusing because those had actually become a part of me over the decades that we had spent together. And so going through that journey of rediscovering, oh, how can I bring dance into my life? How can I bring movement, art, something outside of this? I do still love my job and I want to keep it, but it is not only the be all end all in my life. There are other pieces of my life that need to be expressed as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
you,
yeah,
you want to be like a well-rounded person, and then when you get there, they're just like, "Cool, now you only do things for us."
yes, no one tells you about that. That was the biggest surprise.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I got soapboxes upon soapboxes about that, but that's not the point of this. That's
Okay, that is a future episode. We will get to that later. Okay, so did you have a role model for your career when you first started on this journey?
Not really. Well, I shouldn't say that. So the photography work kind of started just from being around a lot of creative people, just like meeting friends in New York. Actually, a lot of people that I met through friends that I made at Boston Duck Tours. I swear it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Wow.
It runs the ducks run deep. But just meeting a bunch of like musicians and photographers and stuff like that, and kind of ending up in these random circles. I had a camera briefly in college, and then I couldn't really. I never really got the hang of it, and I just never really used it. So I didn't do anything for a while, and then all of a sudden, Instagram rolls around, and then I started following more proper photographers and kind of started taking like the image itself more seriously. And then I bought myself a camera at this point almost a decade ago, and I had people around me that were just like, "Yeah, you got an eye for something," and I'm like, "Okay." And then it was a little bit easier 10 plus years ago to like bring a camera into a venue, like not necessarily a big
Mm.
giant camera with a massive lens, but like I had a little Fuji that fit in a purse and you put a small lens in it, it was fine. And so I just shot in the crowd. And so I was just going to gigs and taking pictures in the crowd. And then I just became more friends with other photographers and somehow ended up friends with people that worked at publications. I got asked to shoot for a local blog, which meant I would get photo passes to stuff. And then all of a sudden it turned into, my buddy Josh, who's out in Chicago, works for Under the Radar magazine. And I got the ability to go shoot the Newport Folk Festival a couple of years ago.
Nice.
It was just, so when you ask about role models, it's not so much like formal role models. It's just the community of people and like hanging out in the pit with like all of these people that are now really good friends of mine. And we're all just like, all right, what gigs you got this month? What do you have this month? Da, 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 da. During COVID, I ended up meeting a lot of like street photographers and protest photographers. And I'd just be on my bike with a camera, just like, we're doing this thing.
You didn't need hands? Wow, amazing.
I need one hand.
Okay.
It was a very light camera. Also, I probably was taking my life in my hands. But we're still here. But yeah, it really is. It's less role model and more community. I look up to so many of these people, but it's more just like you get, oh, I love this person's style. I love the way that this person works with light. This person, actually like full-time freelances and makes it work in New York. Let me pick their brain about how they manage their finances or like how they do this or how do you balance the well-paying gigs with the ones you really want to do. And like that, I've been talking with some folks recently about like personal projects and how you incorporate those things into your day to day. So it's more community than necessarily like somebody that I've looked up to, like that's where I want to go. It's more like there's a collection of things here that I just want to do.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And then it's what is the next step for you and what does it look like? And you meet people who are doing interesting things and then you can figure out how to take, elements of that and apply it to your own life and
Exactly.
expand out in those directions. So I think that's really
Exactly.
cool.
And I fully recognize, that my own benefit in this is that I have a well-paying full-time job. It's most often not an incredibly high stress role. I rarely work past New York business hours. People kind of work East Coast hours. I'm never expected to be on the clock after 5 unless it's an emergency. And people and like it's got a good work-life balance, all things considered. And I'm in the office 3 days a week, which brutalizes me, but at least it's not 5. But
Yeah.
I recognize, and I've had people tell me before, like, people like me who have the ability to not freak out about the day to day money, I don't want to take that for granted when I talk about like doing personal work and like going for these other things because I have some level of cushion, quote unquote, because I'm working full time. I'm not like, I don't have to look to my art to sustain my finances. Now, the problem is that I just end up working all the time, but it's kind of the balance that I'm trying to find. I don't know.
We've chosen this problem, but
Help.
help. I don't know. You're going to help me. I'm so glad you brought it back to the full-time job because having that allows you the ability to experiment, to take risks. So
Mhm.
tell me, how are you managing your job with this moonlighting? I want to know all the details. So
Yeah.
basically, what does a week look like? You've just told me that you're in office, you're kind of hybrid. So 3 days in office, 2 days
Mhm.
remote. And
Mhm.
then the events that you shoot, it's mostly events that you're
Mostly at
photographing.
night. Yeah. And this is kind of the conundrum, right? Like a lot of stuff that I would want to shoot is during the day or I would need daytime availability. So, there's times where I'll like utilize PTO to take to take a day. Or, I've shot some stuff for running brands before where it's like before work. It's like an hour or two in the morning before I go to the office. But most things, gigs and the like, of course, are at night. I'm doing my first wedding next month, which will be on a weekend.
Congrats.
So we'll see how that goes. It all kind of depends, on kind of like how busy the gig calendar is and stuff like that. So a lot of the concerts that I shoot are actually not paid, because I shoot for some of the venues, and it's kind of one of those things. They use the images for social media. It's a pretty low deliverable ask, and you get free tickets and comp drinks and things of that nature. Now, it's a very contentious thing within this subset of the industry, because there's this collective devaluing of a lot of the photographic work, and there's this expectation of photos and videos that a lot of bands have when they hire people, but because so many publications and venues don't necessarily pay people to take those photos, then a lot of people will end up undercharging or doing stuff for free otherwise, and it's a pretty difficult problem and thing to solve, which is again why I'm grateful for the full-time job, because then I can take on some of these, unpaid gigs just to have the ability to shoot some of my favorite bands. But some months of the year are a bit slower, like winter and the beginning of the year. There's not a lot of gigs. So when things get busier, I mean, it's basically just like I plan my work from home days around shoot days so that I don't have to run into Midtown and then come back to Brooklyn and then take care of the dog and then try to eat something and then go.
Yeah.
It's, the thing is, I'm almost 40 and I'm really tired.
Same.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think that's a real part of the conversation as well, is like this notion of, of course, the notion of having it all and trying to do it all is a perpetual conversation, but it's a real thing, especially when you're kind of on your own and you're solo. I'm starting to recognize in recent months, especially, like, wow, I'm like trying to maintain my house and do my job well and do my other job well and develop my skills, and I need to learn new things, and I got a dog, and I'm like running around all over the place, and it's tiring. So
Yeah.
a lot of what I try to do now in the day-to-day too is just try and figure out like where the energy really needs to go, and say no to things strategically or be smart about stuff. But it's tough. But yeah, it really is just a lot of like, I'm up early, I'm running, I'm going to work, I'm coming home, I'm maybe working some more, and then you come home, and then you keep working because you're editing,
Yeah.
and then I'll edit in the morning, and then you da-da-da-da, it's a
Yeah.
lot.
It's a lot. And that's so real. That's something I've been noticing in myself as well, that, my
Mm.
capacity is not what it was when I was 20. And
Or we aging. We
we
aging.
are, and I'm feeling it now. And I was like,
I like
oh
it.
wow. In my mind, I think I'm still the same age, and every older person has told me this. And
Hmm.
now I say, oh, I'm saying it too. Okay.
Yep.
But yes, I don't have the capacity I think I have. And I want to say yes to everything because
Yep.
everything sounds fun. And then
Yep.
you actually realize, oh, if I commute this far on this day, it means I'm going to lose this amount of time to do deep work on a different project. And it's actually expensive in a way that I hadn't realized. So
Yep.
how do you decide what to say no to? How have you learned to prioritize recently?
Oh God, that's a great question. Well, one of the things is not taking on, certain gigs if they're low or no payment. There's one venue group that I will shoot for that is gratis, and it's only because we get, there's a whole collection of us, and the ask is like 15 photographs. It's really like a very low ask, and so I tell myself that that's the only gratis stuff I'm gonna do. Like, even, a lot of times if a friend or like an acquaintance in a band asks me to do stuff, I'm like, you really got to throw me like you got to throw me a little bit of money. I really can't be doing it. I really can't be doing these things gratis, really almost at all anymore. I mean, the ideal is to not do them at all ever. But I also have to recognize that, especially with music, it's a very saturated market of photographers, all of who, like so many of whom are so incredibly talented. And so the more I'm able to practice, the better. And a lot of these gigs where the deliverable is low, kind of like, well, these are my opportunities to just kind of mess around, try new things, test out new equipment. And so that's what I use those things for. But it is just trying to take on a little bit less. And the reason I have a particular day job like the one I have is also to maintain that balance. Like, if we were to go back 5 days a week, I'd have to have a real conversation with myself about that. Because, I moved in December. I'm a little further away from Manhattan. My commute's just a little bit longer, but it makes a big difference in how friggin' tired I am.
Yeah.
And I got responsibilities to my home, to my body, to my sweet angel of a dog, whom I love so much and would die for. So it's just a matter of recognizing that that's the balance I keep. I don't want to go work at a startup again because I can't. I have to be able to leave.
Yeah.
It's something I've talked about with, with younger designers a lot too, is just, you're going to be frustrated by something in this industry. And you got to kind of determine what frustration you're willing to deal with. So a more corporate environment, you're not going to be doing like real sexy design stuff potentially a lot of the time, but you might in turn get a more reliable salary, benefits, and some level. I mean, nothing is stable at this point in the year of our Lord 2026.
That ship has
But
sailed.
yeah, that ship has sailed. But this is what I would have said maybe a year ago. But there's some, stability means a lot more to me now than boosting my portfolio with X, Y, and Z. My portfolio is now more photos than design work, which is, hilarious, which I think, we might talk about that as well. That's been an interesting balance of how am I presenting myself with both of these titles. But so much of both of these aspects of work has been word of mouth as well that almost like the portfolio is an important artifact, but I have found that it's not as important as it once was. People talk to me about graphic design because they know, I worked with them 10 years ago, or they know somebody that I worked with, and people hire me for photo gigs because a friend of theirs recommended me and they looked at my Instagram and they like my work.
But let's go there. So your portfolio is more photos than it is design. Where does your portfolio live now? Is it, forgive me, I don't know. Huh?
Oh, it's katiedadarria.com.
Okay, on your
I've been
website.
trying for years to get Dadarria.com because there are so few Dadarrias.
Yeah.
I'm the only Katie Dadarria, and I'm like, I'll just get Dadarria.com. Well, some like distant relative of mine has poached it, and I did some friggin' deep dive due diligence on the internet to try and find them and emailed them, and I was ignored. And I'm like, you're not even using this website. Just give me the domain name. But anyway, it's katiedadarria.com. I used to, for a while, I had two portfolios. I had a design portfolio and a photography portfolio. And then I realized that that was really annoying to maintain. The design stuff doesn't get updated too often because you put live work up there and only so much work ends up going live. And you have a lot of restrictions in corporate America in terms of what you can put up there. So that doesn't get updated quite as much. And then the photo portion of things, I used to put stuff up show by show. So it'd be like, here's this Pearl Jam concert, here's this PJ Harvey concert. And then I realized I have way too many things up there. So at some point soon, one of my tasks is to sit down and basically turn the photo section into like 3 pages for each genre of work and just pick like one image per gig. So that will also be a little easier to maintain because I'm not doing, a new page for every show. And then there's always the toxic urge to redesign the whole thing, but I've just tried to keep it very, very simple so that it doesn't look out of date, and then I can just update it with actual work that I do. There's also all this discourse about like, are portfolios even relevant anymore, or are people just looking at this, that, the other thing? And it's like, yeah, all my pictures are on Instagram or whatever publication they end up going on to, but when they're on my website, I can put them up as big as I would like them to be, which is usually a lot nicer looking than the little stupid squares and whatever shapes on Instagram where they like rip all the pixels out of everything,
Yeah.
So that's fun.
So then speaking of Instagram and I guess LinkedIn, how do you think about what presence to put on which platform? Do you have both in both places?
I do. I don't really use LinkedIn that much because, again, I can't really post a lot of the work that I'm doing because the stuff I'm doing now is in consumer facing, and a lot of it isn't live or doesn't necessarily go live depending on corporate priorities. So I can't really do much there, and I'm not really much for LinkedIn think pieces. But I have started to post more of my other work on there. I've actually enjoyed posting some of the photo work onto LinkedIn because then a bunch of people that I've worked with in the past that like didn't know that I did this are like, oh wow, okay. And I think it's kind of cool to show that other side of me and also just like, hey, this is something that I'm doing just because I like doing it. And a lot of people that I've worked with in the past have also been like big music people or they're athletes, and so they get a lot of enjoyment out of seeing that work. And I just kind of like putting it out there of like, yeah, I'm available for a lot of stuff, people. I'm
Yeah.
available for a lot of stuff. So, even though I'm not working with you 9 to 5, I'm around for other stuff. And it has helped at times. Like I've had people randomly reach out, just for extraneous like photo stuff. Some that's worked out, some that hasn't. My like goal would be to just be doing more of that and to you know, somehow be able to split those two parts of my work life a bit more evenly. Now, in this economy,
I know.
no, but that would be like a longer term goal of mine. So,
Yeah. So then how does this play out at work? Like, are you able to talk to your manager when you have a gig? Is this something you keep a little bit more? I assume we're on a podcast, so it's not that quiet.
yeah,
But how do
yeah.
you mention what you did over the weekend, for
I'm
example?
I'm super lucky in that my boss is also like we just talk about bands and stuff all the time. So yeah, I'm not the thing is that with so much of the work outside of working hours, it's not necessarily something I have to like clear, which is great. But yeah, I tell them about stuff I do in the weekends. I'm just, if I know it's some band that people like, I'll try and get the images onto my work computer so that I can send them to people at work.
Yeah.
And my skip level boss, who I used to work with at Chase, who also grew up in my hometown, which is,
Wow.
yeah, that's a whole nother story. He is also hugely supportive of. He has a photo of mine in his house,
Wow.
So like I'm very lucky in that regard that like people are very respectful of like you should go do the thing that like you love to do. Like, and again, because generally speaking, we're not working crazy outside of work hours, it never comes up as like a thing one or the other.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky in that regard. If I was working for more of a startup, there would probably be more blurring of those lines, but I'd probably have a much harder time doing both of these things than I do now.
Yeah. So there's a really good fit, not just with the people, but with the
Yeah.
two industries that you put together.
Yeah. Hmm.
Amazing. So just want to pivot from here into the lessons learned. Um, Looking back, I guess what was one of the hardest lessons to learn in your kind of hybrid career?
Ooh. Well, one, I think I'm still learning the lesson of like you have to rest more, but you know what? We're just gonna figure that out as we go along.
Yeah.
Um, but actually, one of the hardest lessons I learned just in this general career path, and I think this is something a lot of creative people struggle with, is just like in your work life, you can't ascribe your self-worth to the work. Like you want to do a good job, you want to be successful, but especially when the work itself is born out of creative ideating, when things get rejected, I remember early in my career I would be like devastated when somebody said my design wasn't good. I'd be so sad.
Yeah.
And that was also part of kind of the pivot into entering more of a corporate environment because I realized if I'm working in a more corporate environment, I have a little bit of an easier time being like, yes, I'm being creative, but the creativity is more in the solution to the problem, not necessarily the aesthetics of it, because the aesthetics are pretty rigidly defined by like a design system. And that helps me take a little bit more of that emotionality out of it and just be like, yeah, if somebody doesn't like it, that's not a reflection on me. Like, I want to do well and I don't want to like screw up. But it's all kind of subjective at the end of the day, and it doesn't need to be something that I need to take home and beat myself over the head with.
Yeah.
But that was a hard lesson to learn because I had put so much emphasis on trying to sequester my creativity into a financially solvent path.
Mm,
And in doing that, all of my creative energy went into that. Then focusing so much of my time on photography has really helped with that as well because it's just sort of like the creative stuff in my heart and soul I'm doing outside of work. And
yeah.
so I'm not taking things as personally at work, which is much easier from a professional standpoint to, just focus on doing a good job, but not internalizing it so much.
Yeah. That's so important. And it's a lesson that I feel like I'm still learning
Yeah.
every
I mean,
day.
yeah. Do I
Yeah.
still cry? Sometimes.
Am I crying now? No.
Everybody
Um,
hurts.
we do. We all do.
Hmm.
But so if you could give any advice to somebody who's torn between their responsible career ambitions and then also following their art and their more creative ambitions, what would you tell them?
God, I mean, I would tell them that it's hard and never diminish how hard it is. It might sound a little trite, but there are seasons where one thing takes precedence over the other thing. And at the same time, also, like, I am a very lucky individual and I've come from a pretty secure background and Even though I've been laid off a few times, I've always been all right. So there are plenty of people that that a lot of this wouldn't be feasible. But for somebody who's kind of struggling with it, I would say just make as much effort as possible to carve out even a little time for like the smallest little creative thing on a regular basis when you get home from work or when you wake up in the morning, even if it's just like writing something down, journaling, something of the like. Something I like to do is that I like to go take the dog for a walk, but I just throw a point and shoot camera over my shoulder. And I tell myself, like, okay, I'm going to walk around for like 15, 20 minutes and I got to take pictures of like 3 things that could be interesting, because it's just like reframing my brain to just look at things with that lens. Or even the damn phone camera. Like taking it out on runs, I just look for ridiculous things when I'm out on a run and I'll stop and take pictures of stuff. But I also follow a number of photographers that like have made books out of their iPhone work, because it really is just like the thing that you have on you at that time. And so I try to utilize all of those times, like commuting, running, walking the dog, as times where I also try to engage my brain in that way. I also spend a lot of time lying on the floor thinking about nothing. But I think it really is just trying to see that as a time of rejuvenation for yourself, that even though, you know, you might just want to shut off at the end of the day when you get home from work, and like that is also very important. It's a gift, I find, to try and spend some time noticing something interesting in my neighborhood. And it makes me feel a little bit more optimistic and kind of hopeful about my brain still works. Like I'm still making stuff. And I think, you know, also just with the way that we're so inundated with tech and news and the bombardment of all of these things, I think anything that people can do to set aside like 20 minutes of their day just for the purposes of making something or engaging with something creatively is really, really critical to not losing your mind. So.
Yeah, especially when we spend so much time doom scrolling and we're outsourcing our thinking. Do you have any projects you're working on that you'd like to tell us about?
Okay, well, I've been working pretty slowly, kind of intermittently over the last year or so on an interview project where I'm talking with women in the running community here in New York that are, you know, 45 plus. So women that are in perimenopause, that have gone through menopause, that are kind of in that secondary stage of life. Some of whom are lifelong runners, some of whom are people that came into running after moving to New York. And I just am talking with them about, you know, where they feel they are in the community. Do they feel community? Do they feel outside of it? What has the running been like over time? How have things changed? How have things not? Like, what does it mean to them? It's been great. I need to kick it back up. It was a long fall and winter of like me running a bunch of marathons.
No big deal.
Yeah, that other part of
Which we did not talk about at all.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Has this ever if a tree falls on a marathon, or are they still talking about a marathon? Anyway, but I had envisioned it as something that will be like interviews, and I will incorporate some you know aspect of photography in it, like portraiture or something of that nature. And I'm kind of just seeing where it goes as I talk to more people. But it's been a really wonderful project because it's been one of those things that like a lot of people don't get asked about, you know. And it's been great just meeting people too, and just like talking to women from different clubs here in the city, or people that don't run with clubs at all, talking with coaches and stuff. It's been really great. So that's kind of my long-term personal project. I also have like 80,000 book ideas, which who knows if that will ever happen.
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to get on the festival circuit a little bit this summer. As the Newport lineup comes out, I'm just sort of like, who can I reach out to that might want to take me with them?
Yes, if anybody is listening and has a hookup, please.
Yeah. But yeah, and then just like, you know, going to gigs, a few gigs a month, doing stuff like that. So I'll always be doing more stuff, and if bands need stuff, you know, get at me. And if anybody needs a weird looking dog for like a commercial or a project, I have a very amazing, ridiculous dog who is available for hire because he needs to start bringing money into our household.
Yes, earning his keep. Is Eddie here? Can we see him?
Eddie is here. Hold on, I'll get him.
Gosh, look at that face.
I know.
Very hireable face.
Look at him. He's so handsome. Look at this man. He's like, I hate you so much. Okay. Good boy. I love him.
Oh, amazing. And then where on the internet can people find you?
People can find me at kddadarria.com, and I am at Dadarria on pretty much every other platform, primarily Instagram. But if you look up Dadarria on the internet, you're probably going to hit me, mostly me.
Well, Katie, thank you so much for joining. I've learned so much, and I'm so glad that you were here.
I'm so glad